Let's get some coffee. Oh, I'm gonna have to make more. I'm not out. Kind of forgot what I was doing, not gonna lie. Guys, it's really funny that I'm filming a video today about ADHD and anxiety because I'm having the biggest ADHD day of my life. I was literally setting up video stuff and scrolling to find a photo I needed to insert for a thumbnail, and I just kept scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and by the time I got to the bottom, I remembered, what was I even looking for? And I had to reset the entire thing, restart like 10 minutes later, and so now it is 11:17, and I started prepping at like 11, and that's how distracted I got. So, very fitting. Hi, hello. My name is Amy Prokopis. I am an author. I have written books like the young adult science fiction romance book, The Arena, and the young adult fantasy romance series, Guardians of the Sixth Gate. Book 2 is Shade of the Shadowlands. It just came out, and I am currently working on book 3, the final one in the trilogy, Mistress of Shadows. Welcome to my channel. Today, we are talking about a subject that I deal with every single day, very personal subject that I am not shy about talking about, like at all, and that is my struggles with anxiety and my, how I manage my ADHD every single day of my life. So this is the point in the video where I tell you guys that if discussions around anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder is triggering to you at all, then you may not want to watch this video. I'm not going to go into super detail about like the nitty-gritty of some of the things I've been through, some of the struggles I've had. I'm just going to talk mostly about how I manage it and how I cope with anxiety and move through some of my rough patches. Nothing too serious, but if you are worried about being triggered at all by discussions about anxiety, then maybe save this video for another time, or maybe you don't watch this one. That's okay. I will see you again in another one. Now that we've covered that, I am going to split up this video into 2 parts. We're going to talk about anxiety separate, and then we're going to talk about ADHD, but they are very much, for me and a lot of people who have these same diagnoses, these same issues, they're very much connected. So some of the coping strategies that I use, that I will mention in each section, I actually use for both, and I will mention that when we get to them. But a lot of people that have anxiety, or let's reverse this. A lot of people that have ADHD also have anxiety as a result due to, in part, dealing with anxiety and ADHD together. So for me, they very much go hand in hand, and I have to treat them a little bit that way, hand in hand. We're gonna get more into that with each of those sections, but we are gonna start with anxiety, how I cope, and just a brief little bit of that history there. Maybe I should make more coffee first. To start off, let's talk a little bit about my journey, my experience, and my history with anxiety. I have always had anxiety. I didn't fully know that until I was much older, probably not until I was like 24 or 25. I realized that I've always been anxious in some of these moments in my life that were like so embarrassing to me, or that were so mortifying and like anxiety inducing, were actually the fact that I've just struggle with anxiety. And so that's something that I've had my entire life, but I didn't realize it was a problem, or I guess I should rephrase, it didn't really interfere with my life super significantly until I was in college. I went away to college, and suddenly just sitting in a classroom would send me into a panic. I had my first panic attacks the summer before I went away to college, and then they became a daily thing for me. Multiple times a day, I would struggle to sit through class while the anxiety would build. And then the moment class would get out, and sometimes before, I would leave the room, run to a bathroom, and usually have a panic attack. That was a normal day-to-day occurrence for me. So it wasn't until I went to college that I explored some options and discovered I am dealing with anxiety, and I started to actually address the issue. So it's a little bit of my history. I still struggle with it. I still have panic attacks from time to time, although I've gotten to where I only have maybe like a couple a year now, which is great. So if you struggle with anxiety, there is hope. You just have to learn how to work with it, cope with it, and be open to talking about it with somebody that can really help you, whether that's a friend, discussing it with a family member. I discuss it with my husband a lot. He can tell when I'm anxious before I can sometimes, before it builds up to becoming a problem. He can pick up on that. So as long as you're open to talking about it with somebody, sometimes just speaking it into existence that you're struggling can get it off your chest enough to deal, but it's all about how you cope. So now, let's talk about the ways that I cope with my anxiety disorder. The first thing that I do is I am medicated. I take medication for my anxiety. I'm on an antidepressant, and that helps me a lot. And I know that medication is not something that works for everybody, and sometimes it's not an option for everybody. So here's an example of that. When I discussed it with my doctor, and we talked about coping strategies, my medical history, all of that. I've already stated in this video, I also have ADHD. And up through college, I was medicated for ADHD, and that worked very, very well. It helped me to stay on task. It was really the only thing that was getting me through school. And until that point, my anxiety was not as big of an issue, and it had started in college where they flipped, and suddenly the anxiety was really difficult to manage, whereas it was affecting my day-to-day life, my ability to go out of the house even, my ability to do schoolwork, go to class, that kind of stuff. And so suddenly it was more of the priority than my ADHD. And so when I discussed it with my doctor, we decided that really we need to medicate one or the other. And so for me, medicating anxiety so that I could better function was the priority, and learning some new tips and tricks for the ADHD was the better option. So I medicate myself. 1. 2, I go to therapy. I started going to therapy in college. I had a great therapist there at the university, and I didn't go to therapy for about a year while I was adjusting to my new work, like adult big girl job, I like to call it. And it started to build up again a little bit. And so I thought, I kind of want to talk to somebody. And so I started seeing a therapist, and I've been seeing the same therapist for the last, holy crap, oh my gosh, the last 6 years, I think. Whoa, that's a long time. So I see a therapist. The area of therapy we mostly work with is cognitive behavioral therapy and reality therapy. That's a big thing he really does. I, as some of you know, am a school counselor. I am actually working towards finishing my LPC, which is licensed professional counselor. So therapy is something that I've grown and I've gained a lot of knowledge in, and I would love to practice therapy at some point in my professional life. And so I find that those kinds of therapy really work for me. They're not my favorite kinds of therapy, but they're the ones that work best for me. So therapy, highly recommend it. If you've never been to a therapist, you should try it, especially if you're struggling through something that you can't just talk out with somebody. The professionals, they know what they're doing. Something else I do is writing. Any kind of creative outlet in general helps alleviate my anxiety a ton. For me, that primarily is writing. So even though writing has become kind of a job for me, I still get a huge amount of relief when I can sit down and get a really good, solid writing session in. I usually feel rejuvenated for the whole week. So doing something creative, it occupies my mind differently. It takes up a lot more space in my brain, so I'm able to switch the anxiety off for a little bit. It calms me. So something creative in general does the same thing, but writing is my primary creative activity. So for me, writing really helps with my anxiety. Something I've done recently is that I disconnect. And you hear this all the time about unplugging from the world, doing some relaxing, self-care, but this disconnecting works a little different for me. I had everything for work connected to my phone just because it's super convenient, right? I had my email there because the job I work, I'm not always in my office. I'm on my feet sometimes. Sometimes I'm never in my office that day, and I'm not able to sit and take phone calls or even look at emails. And so it's really convenient to me when I'm out and about doing my thing, helping a student here, going over here to help with a crisis. It's huge, huge, huge for me to have my email connected at all times, because that is the quickest way I can get information, and that is how information is primarily sent out in our building. However, I found out that having it connected to my phone specifically meant that my brain never turned off of work mode, even when I got home and even when I set my phone aside. So I started with just sitting my phone aside, trying to keep it out of sight, out of mind. But when I'm home and I switch to writer mode, so much of what I do for marketing is like social media. So I kind of needed my phone with me. So the middle ground for me was getting an iPad. I know not everybody can do that. I got an iPad. It functions for writing a little bit also, but I do a lot of my on-the-go work at my job through the iPad. So I have my email connected on the iPad, not on my phone, and I have notifications turned off. That way, when I'm on the go, I can open up the app, look at my email, and close it out. And that has worked perfect for me to disconnect. It's helped a ton with switching off work mode and switching writer mode on. And I actually noticed a gigantic difference in anxiety as soon as I did that. So that is one thing I do. Another thing, speaking of work, is I ferociously defend my boundaries. This comes in both areas, writing and at work. I defend my writing time in the evenings. If I haven't done a lot of writing during the week and I really need a session, I'll tell my husband I need to sit down and write tonight, and I'll tell him that when we get home, when we're doing dinner. That way we can make the plan for that in the next couple of hours. And then he knows not to make plans for me, to leave me alone, and to try not to bug me and take care of things if something arises, like help with Finn a little more. That way I can focus on the writing session that I need to do that night. So we defend my writing boundaries in that sense. Same thing with the weekends. We know weekends are writing heavy days. So if we're going to do something else, I need to plan well in advance for that so I can shift that time elsewhere. When it comes to work, I set a boundary for myself by setting a timer. I have an alarm on my phone. It goes off every day at 4:00. My contract times for school counseling, we start our work day at 7:45. So I get to work and I'm on the clock doing emails and all the prep work before school with students at 7:45. Usually a little earlier than that, I show up just to prep, so I'm ready to go at 7:45. And then our contract time ends at 3:45. That is when we're off the clock. Usually all of the students have left the building, although occasionally some of them are hanging around. Sometimes I'm working. If there's a crisis that happens at the end of the day, I have to be available. So sometimes I have to work past that into like 6:00 sometimes. But unless the crisis is the only exception to that. Obviously, if a student is in crisis, I help them. That's the only thing that I will lower my boundary for. But otherwise, 4:00, I am wrapping up and I'm out of there. I try to leave by 4 or as 4 hits, and I have an alarm on my phone real loud that tells me, hey, it is 4 o'clock. It is time to finish what you're doing, finish the sentence, hit send on the email, wrap up your conversation and go home. Because past that point, especially when there's not students in the building, you're just finding things to do, and it stresses me out. So I set myself that boundary, 4 o'clock every day, that alarm goes off and I'm wrapping up. And like clockwork, sure enough, I am. And because I don't have my emails connected to my phone anymore, I am completely disconnected. I am off the clock. I don't answer emails. I go home, and then whatever comes in, I pick up the next day at 7:45. It'll still be there, I promise. I also schedule mental health days. I don't schedule them. I don't sit down with the big calendar, and go, this day in October, 2 months from now, I'm going to take a mental health day. I do it month by month. I look at how busy the month is, what I have going on. I also do a self-assessment. How do I feel right now? Do I feel tense? Am I struggling to relax when I'm at home and off the clock? Or is writing difficult? That's a huge indicator for me. If I cannot be productive, or I don't feel like I want to sit down and write, that is usually usually the first indicator to me that my anxiety is building to a point that I need to start addressing it. And so when I start to feel that, especially if I'm not having a good writing session or I'm struggling with the creativity, then I look at my calendar and I schedule a mental health day, which for me is usually a day off of work. I call in sick, or I schedule a personal day, and I sit at home. Everyone else goes to work. Finn still goes about his routine, still goes to my parents' house for the day. It's just me and June, honestly. And I sit at home and I try not to do things that are going to stress me out. Like I don't do housework. I try not to do the housework because that stresses me out. Or if I do, I tell myself I'm going to stop doing housework by noon. And then the afternoon, I'm going to do something else. And sometimes that may end up being writing if I'm feeling up to it and I can get it out, sit down, and sometimes that's the reset, getting the creative time. Just like I said earlier, it can be rejuvenating for me. So if I'm feel up to it, I do that. But if it's really a struggle, that's when I do some of my other self-care techniques, which are things like I go for a run. Running is a huge help when I am feeling anxious, and it's something that I actually use in my coping toolkit for my anxiety. It's one of my things on my list. I try to run 4 days a week. That usually maintains a lot of the anxiety for me, helps me from getting out of hand, is running those 4 days a week, or at least consistently. And so sometimes on those mental health days, I use them to be sure that I can get a nice run in. That is what I do a lot of the times. But sometimes I just take a bubble bath or just sit around, take a nap. Let's talk about running some more. Running is hugely helpful for my anxiety. Exercise in general, you'll hear that a lot from therapists. They'll ask what your regimen is. Do you work out? Do you go on walks? Walks are another really big one. Honestly, it's the repetitive motion of running for me that enables my mind to just disconnect. It's calming. When we have panic attacks, we feel our heart kind of feels like uncontrollable. It beats really fast, right? And it doesn't feel like you have physical control of your own body. It's very disconcerting. It's very similar to a heart attack. You'll have chest tightness. You'll struggle with breathing. You might even feel dizzy. You should not pass out. That is not a normal thing, even though you may feel like it. You should not pass out. But running for me is a way for me to take control of that feeling of panic and stimulate it in a way that I have control of. So when I am in the middle of panic attacks or I'm feeling like one is coming on, going on a run if I can, or if I'm at work, getting up and taking a really brisk walk, something that's going to elevate my heart rate a little bit, helps regulate it. So that's why running is hugely helpful. because of the physicalness of it. Mind and body definitely go together. That's why mental health is such a big deal, and people who struggle with their mental health often struggle with physical health or get sick a lot. So running, not only is it just really good for you, like your body, but it's really good for your mind. It helps me clear my mind, and that's why I use it as one of my coping strategies. Whew, that was a lot of talk about anxiety and a whole lot at once. I felt like I was going 90 miles an hour. I think I'm going to take a minute to make some more coffee, and then we'll move on to ADHD. All right, on to how I manage my ADHD. Let's talk about ADHD. If you are not familiar, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, and really there are like two branches of it. Some people have ADHD with hyperactivity. Some people have ADHD without hyperactivity. I do not have the hyperactivity. Occasionally I do, and I get real excitable about things. Usually when I'm in social situations, like if I go out to a party, somebody will mention something and my brain will go, that also happened to me, that happened to me too. And I need to remember exactly what happened so that as soon as you're done with your story, I can jump in and tell mine. And I get really excited, hoping I don't miss the moment, don't want to jump in too early, but also don't want to miss the opportunity. And now I have not at all listened to what that person is talking about. And it turns out their story had nothing to do with that thing that I thought it did. And now I don't have a story anymore. So like that, there's a tangent. Basically, for me, my ADHD manifests itself in difficulty focusing. I have a difficult time focusing. I also am really fidgety, which is why I talk a lot in videos with my hands. It's also why I fidget with my rings. This is actually a fidget ring. We'll get into fidgets in a minute, but mostly if you're watching me, my ADHD comes out in like a lot of restlessness, and also it manifests in like not so much forgetfulness, but I'll have a hard time sitting down and getting started on a task. And I also have a really hard time transitioning from one task to a new task. One way I manage this in my writing world, in the author world, is I do writing sprints. If you didn't know, I go live here on YouTube every single Sunday at 8:20 Central Standard Time. We go for about an hour or so, almost 2 hours. We try to wrap up by 10, and writing sprints help me focus a lot. Productivity sprints help me a lot. So in the writing world, I'll do 20 minutes just focusing on the scene I'm writing, and that is motivating. It's also like a challenge to me, and I love a good challenge. So I'm all about bucking up to see how much I can get done, get more done than the last writing sprint. I love that. I do productivity sprints when I clean my house. Also, I will queue up a YouTube video and I will tell myself I can watch this true crime episode, this 30-minute video, but I have to clean the living room while I do it, and I'll do that. And then I'll give myself a little bit of break and maybe watch a different video, or just like take a break from what I was doing, pat on the back, good job, you did 20 minutes. And it's motivating, it keeps me on task. And then the multitasking of having the timer going or having the music going while I'm doing the writing sprint, or knowing a timer is gonna shut me off. I know that I will be cued, I don't have to remember to transition. And also the YouTube video, being able to follow the beats of the YouTube video, it keeps my brain active while my hands are also active. That is a huge thing for people with ADHD. It's the way we function best. You have to find something for us to physically do while also something for us mentally to do. Otherwise, our brain is gonna wander off somewhere else and find something to do. Same thing with our hands for somebody that's hyperactive. If you only give us something to do, like just watching a movie is so difficult, my hands are gonna find something else to do. So you have to connect the two. You have to find that connection between mind and body for us to really mesh and be super, super productive. So writing sprints, huge for me. I also, like I said, when we started this, I struggle with transitioning from one activity to another. If I am in a really big writing session and it's going really well, and then my husband walks in and says, it's time to go, we have to go to dinner, my brain gets so frustrated, I get tense, and then that's when that anxiety piece that we talked about before, that's when the anxiety shoots up, that's when it builds, and I'll spend the rest of the night really like feeling stressed out because I didn't get that time for my mind to come down and move on to something else. So transition time is huge. And the way I do that is like timers. Like I said, I'll tell myself, once this video ends, I have to take a couple minutes to like reset, and then I have to move on to this next task. So giving myself a middle ground, usually for me, it's about 5 minutes, 10 minutes sometimes, if I'm really doing a big task, that I have to just sit. So what I do at the end of my writing sessions is when I'm about done writing, I can't just move on. Like, I like to write at night, so I can't just go from my writing session at night to going to sleep, because if I do that, I stay up. I will be up for another like 20 minutes, my brain going wild, thinking about all these things to put into the scene, and then like really making sure I remember them, and so I'll be up even longer. So I have to give myself transition time. So what that looks like for me is I finish writing, and then maybe I watch a YouTube video, I listen to a couple songs, or I review my schedule for the next day. That is a really common one that I do. I just review what I'm going to be moving on to, the next thing before I move on to it, or I scroll my phone. That way my brain is able to come down doing some kind of mindless activity that, again, uses my hands as something physical, and then I can move on to the next task. I already mentioned this one a little before, but I fidget. I talked about that combining the mind and the body to get productivity here. Well, for me, it's a lot to do with my hands. I just said a minute ago that I have a ring. I fidget with my rings a lot. And when I first got married and my normal ring moved to my wedding ring, I started to fidget with this, and I dropped it one time in my classroom while I was teaching, while I was doing this, fidgeting with it. I dropped it, and I realized maybe I shouldn't fidget with the expensive wedding ring. Maybe I need something else. And there's this brand called Conquer Ring that makes these fidget rings, which I adore. You can now customize them. They have a lot more options than when I ordered this one. This one says, stay strong. It just looks like a bunch of markings, but when you spin it, I don't think you'll be able to see it on camera, but when you spin it, you can actually see the message. Oh, you kind of can. It'll read, stay strong. And so it clicks. You can use it to click. You can spin it. Also, I do that sometimes. I bought a necklace, which is basically the same thing. It's a little pin that you see sometimes, and I use it also. I fidget with it when I'm in the car, especially on car rides. And sometimes I just take it off and I spin it around my finger like this. This is my favorite way to fidget. And I do that a lot when I'm at work and I'm in meetings. But my all-time favorite fidget that has worked since I was a really little kid and was just starting into writing and writing physically is these pen caps. My favorite fidget is the Papermate erasable pen caps. There's something about the shape of them that turn real easy, and my fingers like this, you'll see me doing this a lot. I twist it between my fingers, usually in just my right hand. Sometimes I tap it like this and twist it on a desktop, and I do that a lot, and it helps my mind focus. So this I always have when I'm writing. If I don't have it when I'm writing, I don't write very well or at all. That's how important fidgeting is to that mind and body connection for me to stay productive. And I want to tell you, I'm going to show you guys a trick that I developed so that I always have one of these with me at all times. A while back, I kind of came up with this idea to keep one of these with me at all times. At work, I would just clip the pen part onto my lanyard, but I lost it a couple of times and had to get new pen caps, and that just like disrupts my brain a little bit, getting used to a new one. And so I realized there has to be a better way for me to carry these around with me everywhere, and like a keychain form. And I remembered they make chapstick holders. So I ordered a pack of these chapstick holders that have the little slit in the top. They're just like a little piece of fabric, and I slip a pin cap into each of these. This one is my car, so that way when I'm out and about, I always have one with me to fidget with. It's always with me. I also stuck one of these on my work lanyard because we're supposed to wear our IDs everywhere. So I have one of these on my work lanyard, which is with me at all times. That way when I'm out and about, going to a crisis, sitting in a meeting, I'm away from my desk, I always have a pin cap with me to fidget with and help me focus and be more productive at work when I'm out and about, when I'm at my computer. Helps a ton. Fidgeting also helps my anxiety a ton. It's a way for me to get anxious energy out of my body. I mentioned earlier that I run because the repetitive motion helps clear my mind, and also getting my heart rate up, getting my heart rate up is a way for me to not maintain, I can't remember that word, but it's a way for me to raise my heart rate myself, not because of the anxiety, but a way for me to get it going in a healthy way and calm it down for a different task. And it triggers my brain that this is something new, this is not anxiety, this is a different task. And it helps me to calm down. And fidgeting does kind of the same thing for me. So that's where anxiety and ADHD meet. And this is by far my number one tool for both. I also set myself a lot of routines. I do things in a specific order. That is definitely an anxiety thing. I brush my teeth and I do my night routine in the same order. And if I don't, I might forget a step, like usually my medication, which is not a good thing. So routines, I set routines. Coffee is also something that helps me. For most people, caffeine wakes them up, right? It gets you going. It makes your heart speed up, yada, yada. That's why they say that people that struggle with anxiety shouldn't drink a lot of caffeine and maybe should even cut it out. For me, I actually feel calmed down and more centered, ready to go if I drink coffee. It does not excite me the way that it does for a lot of people. It does wake me up a little bit, but I am the type of person that I could have 2 cups of coffee in the evening and then go to sleep. It does not keep me awake at night. It actually helps me to keep more focused and relaxed. So coffee is another thing that I do. I drink coffee for my ADHD and anxiety, or my ADHD, not so much the anxiety. Also, knowing the plan and knowing what to expect, that is huge for my anxiety, but it also helps me to manage my ADHD so I remain productive. If I know the plan for the day, then I'm more likely to complete it, and I'm more likely to get even more than that done if I have a plan. If I don't have a plan, that's where my brain finds things to do, and suddenly I'm doing tasks that I don't really have to do today, or I'm cleaning my house even though I have a deadline tomorrow, because that for some reason my brain is more engaged by than this deadline. So I have to set myself a plan. And also when I set myself a plan, that comes with a to-do list. To-do lists are really helpful for me, and I try to keep them short. I try to keep them to like a do this morning or do this afternoon, or if there's not a lot going on, I'll do one for the day. And that helps my brain to like come back to what I was supposed to be focused on. So even if I do wander off, I can come back to that subject usually shortly after and still complete it in a timely manner. Also, checking off things on a to-do list and being productive is kind of it's a release of dopamine. And if you don't know what dopamine is, it is like the happiness chemical in your brain, which is something that a lot of people with anxiety do not have enough of or need more of. And so checking something off my to-do list makes me feel better. It makes me feel productive, and my anxiety tends to go down when I feel productive and when I check things off that list. So that is also a really helpful part of coping and managing with my ADHD, but also my anxiety. I'm realizing now that this video is getting kind of long, and I've also been filming long enough that, speaking of ADHD, my brain is starting to find other things to do, and I'm starting to not focus so much on this. So you're seeing it in real time. It's time to move on. Let's wrap things up, shall we? So that is how I manage my ADHD and my anxiety. You can kind of tell now from this video, they both go together, unfortunately well. Sometimes one is more distracting than the other, but we always cope, and these are the tools that I use. Sometimes I have to focus on using one tool a lot during the day because it's working to manage, and then sometimes that tool is not working as well the next day. So it's really a give or take. I have to constantly reassess myself for my mental health, also for my focus. Why am I so distracted? All of those questions, I do that on the daily. That's just my life, coping with anxiety and ADHD. If you're somebody that has anxiety or ADHD or maybe both, let me know in the comments, what are your tricks? What do you do to help manage? Was there anything I mentioned in this video that you might try or that you do that also works for you? Let me know. I'm always open to finding some new things to add to my toolkit. Maybe it'll work better than what I'm using currently. I don't know. But I would love to hear from you and hear your thoughts. Let me know. Yes. But that is pretty much it for the video. Thank you guys for following along. Click the description below. There's a Linktree link there. I keep that super up to date. You can find all of my books, any specials that are happening. All of my social media are there. Follow me on TikTok and Instagram. I am super active. Follow my Patreon if you want to get exclusives. I have an entire book there that you can read for free. It is an early draft. That book is Winter Witches, and it does not come out until the fall, so you could go read it before anyone else does in an early form. That is a little rough, but I still think it is great. So check that out. All of that's in the description below. Thank you for watching to the very, very end. I'm always happy to hear from you guys and connect, so feel free to reach out, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!